First of all, thanks for joining us today, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, super pumped. I know we've talked a lot in the past and even collaborated on some projects. So kind of fun to do something like this where we actually get into some nitty gritty on like what I do on a day to day basis, what you do on a day to day basis. So super pumped about it.
Me too, man. Me too. It'll be good times. I'm excited for a couple reasons. One is just to let everyone know, Jordan Nelson and I, we met. I don't know, it's been a minute, but we worked on some projects together. And I will say this too: we had a chance to work with Jordan and his team. There's a lot of good Salesforce consultants out there. There's also a lot of bad Salesforce consultants out there, and so I feel like there are a lot of posers I've found as tried to work on some projects with some folks. Jordan and his team have been awesome. So yeah, he'll obviously give a little bit of background, but it was great working with you and your team on some of those
Yeah, thanks,
projects. So
man.
thanks for
I
your help with that.
appreciate
It's been
that.
awesome for sure, for sure. Well, yeah, maybe we start there. Why don't you tell
Sure.
us a little bit about yourself, who you are, and what you've been up to?
Yeah, for sure. So I got into the Salesforce world 7 or 8 years ago. Started off over at Walmart E-commerce. Actually, was a smaller company, Jet.com, that Walmart bought. And that was kind of like where this all started with Salesforce stuff. I got into like a business analyst role over there, and then being in like the Lehigh Draper area, I was able to kind of get my way into Podium and then Divvy, Health Equity. And then my last stint before starting my own company was with a company called Vercel out in San Francisco. So it was primarily tech, primarily SaaS companies, did a little bit of fintech in there with Divvy. And then along that way, I've kind of just always tried to post on social media, LinkedIn, put myself out there to honestly, it was just to get better jobs. Like there was always that guy that would get like way more certifications in the Salesforce world. And I was like, I'm just not going to be that guy that gets like 40 of these. So I started posting on social media just to kind of get better leverage that way for interviews and stuff. Just obviously stayed with that after I started my own company. There was like a period of time there where I started taking on some clients on my own while I still had a full-time job. So now I've been running my own company for just over 3 years. And we're a small team, but growing, which has been fun, and trying to get myself more out of the day-to-day at this point. And it's been a lot more of just kind of overseeing some of the people on our team and making sure that they keep up the quality. So yeah, that's where we've kind of come in with you guys and worked on some of the projects. So it's been a fun ride so far. Yeah.
That's awesome. And you guys just got back from New York, yeah? You spent some time in New York. Tell us a little bit
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah, it was awesome. Having spent the majority of my life out here in Utah, I was born and raised here. So parents are from a small town, Price. I don't know if you've been to Price, but
Yeah. Oh,
okay.
yeah.
So they're from Price. Not much going on there these days. And yeah, they moved to Salt Lake. I was born in the West Valley area. We moved to Riverton when I was around 12, and then I did the rest of my growing up in Riverton. So had a little stint with the mission stuff, went out to Houston and then stayed a couple years after my mission in Houston and then eventually moved back here. So pretty much all my life here in Utah. So yeah, moved out to New York this summer, which was a lot of fun. As my wife and I brought our two dogs with us. Definitely a big change of pace and life and people you meet and how you go about day-to-day living, but absolutely loved it. It was so much fun. I've always enjoyed like visiting there. And I feel like you probably have like seasons and things like that in like people's lives, of like where you fit in. I think for me right now, we've been trying to have kids for some time. We just haven't had that happen yet. So for me, it's a lot of like connecting with people that are like really focused on their job and like that's kind of like the grind mode, I guess you could say, while they're out there. I just felt like that's kind of more the vibe I got when I was there versus here where I currently live. It's a lot of family oriented stuff, a lot of little kids in like my neighborhood, which is great. I'm just not in that season of life. So I feel like at times I don't always fit into all that kind of stuff. So it was a good change up that way, I felt like.
It's a cool opportunity. You got to go do that. One of the many perks of owning your own business, I guess, too, right?
Yeah.
Getting a chance to be able to go and just say, I'm going to go work out of New York for a few months. That's really cool. Good for you. That's awesome. You got
Yeah.
that
Yeah. I
opportunity.
appreciate it. Thanks for the follow up on that.
For sure, for sure. Okay, so today we're going to chat about one of the common questions that we get. I think marketers just in general have this question or questions about Salesforce tracking and how to set things up properly. We get this question frequently from our clients as well. What's the best way to do it? How do we do it? I think you and I both worked at enough companies to where we see that it's done a little bit differently everywhere you go. And so I'm excited to dive in today. The unique thing about, so you not only have in-house experience at some pretty big tech companies, So you've seen how they've done it, but then you also have the purview of working with several clients. So
Yeah.
today, looking forward to the conversation just to see what's like the perfect way. Is there a perfect
Yeah.
way? What's the right way to do it? What's the wrong way to do it? Because I know that Salesforce can be overwhelming. We still, and a lot of it too is foundational because if you don't set it up correctly right out of the gate, when you go to pull reporting and you want to come back and report on the efficacy of marketing, how do you do that and how do you, how does that work? And obviously things are changing. We talk about this a lot internally, but with our clients, the playbooks and the way things were done even 5 years ago, those are not working as effectively anymore. And so I think marketers in general are trying to just rethink, how to do it and what's the right way. How
Yeah.
should I be thinking about marketing in 2025 and beyond? So maybe we'll start it off with just kind of give us a high level of
Yeah.
how do you structure Salesforce? How do you think about it at a high level to make sure that we can report on everything that we need to?
Yeah. I think what you said with the foundation is probably a big key. With the rise of AI and like the buzzword this year with agents, and I think being in tech, we kind of are like specialized in that with Salesforce. So a lot of the people that we meet up with, I think that's the challenge is they're very tech forward. They're always trying to look for like the new thing coming out and they always want to innovate. And I don't think that's bad by any means, but I think it almost serves as like that shiny object idea where it's like, oh, well, there's this new up and coming thing. And like, why don't we do this? And why don't we try this new idea? And, um, I think it serves its own purpose to a degree where, yeah, you should be looking into that and seeing better ways you could do it and cut costs, whatever. But when it comes down to it, I think just trying to make sure that you have Salesforce as like your hub of data, I think always has been pretty tried and true in my experience so far. There's always exceptions to that rule, but in general, if you can make it to where we get as much data inside of this place as possible, it's going to be easier for you and your team to then figure out what to do. So, kind of a cliche way of saying it, but I always like to look at it as like that really is like the crystal ball. So, if we can get all of these nitty gritty details inside of Salesforce for marketing, that's where you're actually going to then figure out what's working through patterns. So then you can pull reports, you can look at what's happening frequently in August, you can look at what's happening when we run Facebook campaigns, you can look what's happening when we run LinkedIn campaigns. But I think the common error is that usually gets pushed around to different areas. So sometimes that's tracked across like HubSpot, Salesforce, and Excel sheets. And then in these situations where we're working with tech companies, sometimes they develop their own thing, right, that they want to have. And the problem is when you silo stuff out, you can't really just get one view. And then you start second guessing yourself on what the actual truth is because you'll pull something in Salesforce, it tells you a number, and then you'll do that in HubSpot and it's a different number. Then you'll pull that in your Excel sheets manually and it's a different number. So it just really slows down how fast you can make the decision. But more importantly, you just really don't really feel like you know the actual truth. It's like, well, I actually don't know how well this Facebook campaign is performing, right? So I want to say, like, I would say number one is just like what you said, the foundation. Trying to put it all in one spot so that you can see it is really what's going to help you pull the lever to then say, looks like from this data, Facebook is killing it. Let's just spend more on the Facebook campaign, right? It comes down to being that simple once you have it in there.
Makes sense. Makes a lot of sense, man. So the term campaign gets thrown around a lot, right? And everyone has a different definition of like, well, let's run a marketing campaign. As it relates to Salesforce, though, how do you think about that? Like, if I want to run, because you have channels, you've got running LinkedIn ads and running Facebook ads. I have organic. I've got all these different channels where I'm distributing my content and pushing traffic from. So, how do you think about campaigns? How should I structure campaigns inside of Salesforce? Is it at a channel level? Is it like, a piece of content, or how should I think about that?
Yeah, I would say usually it's a channel level. And this comes down to, again, the company and how much effort you want to spend on what you think that foundation is. So, channel level, but I've seen it as detailed as like everything on your website. For example, if we use a website as an example, when someone comes to the website and we want to start tracking in Salesforce what people are clicking on and what drove them to take a certain action, well, I've seen it down to where we have this button at the top titled something different. Then we have like the middle button titled something different. Then we have the one at the bottom titled something different. And as we push those unique identifiers into Salesforce, we can then see at a grand scheme in the long run, hey, looks like the majority of people are not going below the fold. Like we get 99% of our business from above the fold, which is great. Or it could be the reverse, right? Like, hey, they're not really doing anything until they read our case studies. Or so the more detailed again that you can get, the better, which I think is helpful. So I always try to push for more detailed channel level inside of Salesforce so that we can then look at it and say, okay, this is where, our webinars are at. This is the channel it's coming from, the source it's coming from, and just gather as much UTM parameters as you can inside of Salesforce. The less you do, I think, again, you're going to pull yourself out to then feel confused. You won't really know the truth to say it is specifically campaign 123 from Facebook that we ran on August 16th that is doing this. It's going to be more of a general idea to think it looks like Facebook is working great. But as you know, on the marketing end, like there's so many variables in marketing. It's like, well, what did you have your background? What did you say in that video? What did you wear in that video? What did you have as the call to act? Like, there's so many variables. And so I think like one thing that I've ran into with great CMOs I've worked with too is like, where there's so many variables, you just got to kind of tie that to, there's so many things that you can then test and research and tie back to your data. So the more of that you can capture again inside of Salesforce, the better.
Got it. Yeah, makes sense. I think you're spot on. I think I've run into this a few different times at places I've been or clients that we worked with where you don't want to over engineer it. There's always a balance of like trying to do too much right out of the gate. There's this, trying to get the MVP up and running. But at the same time, I've never regretted capturing more data than less. I've never said, well, I wish we had less data. I wish we had less visibility. So I do think that that's true to set that up foundation. I think it's really, really smart.
Yeah,
What
good.
about what's the difference? So one of the things that gets confused a lot I've noticed over the years is lead source and campaign tracking. So again, if I've got, do I need to have both? And how should I think about those differently? Because again, going back to the campaign concept, well, if I know that the lead source is Facebook, isn't that enough, man? That's all I need, right? Like tell me what the difference is and how I should treat those differently.
Yeah. So lead source, a lot of the time they'll have that something manual like web or referral or whatever it is, cold call, direct, indirect. And campaign tracking is a lot more of like a multi-touch system. So a lot more dynamic. Where did this come from? You can then kind of tie that into what they have in Salesforce, something called campaign influence, which is just basically saying, when this eventually closes as a closed won deal, how do we track that this came from this lead? How do we say that it came from this campaign? And so there's ways to do that in Salesforce too. And that's more of what you're leaning towards with the campaign tracking side of it. You want to be able to then tie back to that opportunity. What dollars I spent on the marketing side went towards it. You would know way better than I do. There always seems to be a friendly competition between sales and marketing on who's sourcing the deals and where that effort's coming from. It always seems to be a balance to try to find within the company. So this is one of those that I think is like super crucial because that will then show both sides of the story. Like, hey, yep, you did close the deal and you did spend a lot of time on the sales front to make that happen. But like we sourced it in the right way in the first part of this deal so that you could actually even get on the phone with that person.
Makes sense. How do you think that's kind of along the same lines? How do you think about campaign effectiveness and measurement? So along those same lines, like what's your recommendation in terms of how we should look at this? Is it campaign influence? Is it, what are you seeing most commonly? So is it like, should I look at the lead source and that's where I should attribute, revenue tied to that? Is it the campaign level? How should I think about effectiveness as it pertains to Salesforce?
Yeah, good question. And you mean more like if the lead source comes in and what we say it's from Facebook, but then is like the complaint there along the way that there's so many more efforts made that it doesn't really matter where it came from. Is that kind
Yeah,
of
exactly. So it's like, let's say to your point, now I'm using, I'm using campaign members, for example, and I've got, met you at a trade show and then you filled out a lead form somewhere along the line, maybe a couple of months later. Like, how should I think about that in setting that up?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, this one's kind of tricky. I think this one's probably a lot more of like that's, I don't know if I have a awesome answer for it, but I think it's that balance again, right? Like you said it at the beginning, over engineering versus simple. I think depending on how many people you have, if you're a smaller company, I would go with lead source first. And it seems to work better to where we're not trying to make it more complicated than it needs to be. I think as you kind of swing more towards enterprise, that becomes a healthy conversation to say, at what point, like how much time has to pass, how many follow-ups, how many reach outs, how many activities does the salesperson have to log in order for this to really not count as a marketing qualified lead and more now as a sales qualified lead. But again, I think that's over engineering depending on how big your company is in the initial stages. I think lead source is usually like a good place to start.
I like it. Yeah, I like that. Well, and I think the thing that's interesting too, everyone wants like this perfect cut and dry answer. And I
Yeah.
think everyone just wants to know, like, no, 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 like, but I need you, Jordan, I need you to tell me specifically what the right answer here is. And it's like what we found is there's so much nuance. And a few years ago, I honestly believe this. It shows you how naive of a marketer that I am. But I would say even 5, 6 years ago, I was like, we're on the cusp of solving this attribution problem. Like, we're going to be able to mathematically quantify every single channel. We are going to solve this. Like, it's just a matter of time. And then the world changed, and then you had all the cookies going away. You had all this tracking and visibility. Like, all this changed and got flipped upside down. And now I think what we're seeing too is like I feel like we're back to, all right, there's no linear journeys here. Like, not everyone goes to an event and then, they don't research, they don't go to the website first and then they go to Facebook next and then they do a pay, it's like the linear buying cycle that we've all hoped for. It's just not how that's just not reality. So I think there's just so much nuance in there for sure. So I think that's a good call.
Yeah. Yeah, that is a good call. I think there's and it's so interesting how marketing can play out that way too, listening to other companies and being a part of their strategies, what they do. Maybe they'll do something like super different in their content where it's nothing related to specifically what we would sell you on. It's just very top of funnel and trying to be wide and gathering that audience. And then, maybe they don't see as much conversions in the first 6 months. So they switch back to, okay, case studies only. And but then you'll have that guy that comes through, or a few people come through later, a year later. And it's like, yeah, man, I found you from, that really top of level. Like, that got me interested in you. And that, like, had you not put that piece of content out that you were super into whatever, farming or something, like, I wouldn't have even known that you did marketing. And so I think you're right. Like, it's really hard to say that do it this way and this is the way that it works, because I think when we look at it from a human level too, like, we all just interact with what we're interested in at the end of the day, so I don't think that on my feed, I think as a business hat, like, we often will be like, it has to be this topic, this is what I have to talk about, because like no one can know me for something different, this is what I'm an expert in. But then as humans, like, we all have our own interests, it's like if something pops up for like me with like cars, like, okay, I'm into cars, like, I'm going to watch that. Equally though, I'm going to watch people that talk about business because I have a business. Equally, I'm going to talk about or look into people that do running. I do a lot of running myself. So we can all have multiple interests and like multiple things that we want to dive into and become experts on. But I think on the business side, we often just think like that can't happen. Like, we have to be this one singular focus. So it is difficult, like you're saying, to then map out, well, okay, well, what does that look like though? How much effort and time do I spend on these things that maybe aren't super related to what we do? And how does that play into people that come through? I think the long-winded answer again, unfortunately, is like, that's why you gather all those dumb data points, right? Because then you can see this in the long run to be like, oh, well, we do this top of funnel stuff, but at the same time, like, we are seeing this as a touch point at one point in time. So this is obviously contributing to something with them wanting to buy from us.
Definitely. Yeah, no, it makes a ton of sense. Okay, last question. It's just kind of a high level. What are you doing from an AI perspective? AI is the buzzword for sure that everyone's talking about. Everyone's trying to figure it out, how they can incorporate it. And I think, it's interesting to see the different ways that people are thinking about it. Some people are fully embracing it. Some people are saying it's going to, revolutionize everything and just going to eliminate jobs. And other people are saying, they're kind of just burying their head in the sand and hoping that this just passes, right? And so I think there's kind of just different camps in the way people think about this. But for your world and what you're seeing, just kind of give us a high level, like where do you fall in that spectrum? And then also, are there any tools that you're using day in, day out, or does it just kind of depend on the use case and the situation?
Yeah, no, fully embracing it. I am trying to always stay up with like this year specifically, it seemed like agents. Like, I've been working on something this last few months actually for our business, where a common bridge that we have to make for customers once they onboard with us or sell to them is not only does Salesforce like act as your database, but like more importantly, this actually shows you how much time you lose, how much money you lose, what we could do to make this better so that it's more efficient. And that usually takes a lot of manual work for us to then get in as a consultant, look through all your stuff, and then come back and give you that strategy. What we can do now is we've developed an app that we did through agents, which you could just go on, basically talk like normal, like Chat GPT to an agent, and just tell it how to design this app, and it'll just spin it up and walk you through the steps. So we've been trying to do things like that to just stay relevant within it and understand like what the capabilities are. So I think that's how we've embraced it. And then what I've seen on our side of things too. I would also say that I think just in general, like it used to seem like whatever I would talk about, nobody had any idea. And now I think with like AI and everything, the common CEO that we'll speak to that used to know nothing about what we do has a pretty good understanding, like a low level admin, I would say. And so I think it's raising the bar to be like, as usual in these kind of areas, you can't get away with much BS anymore because like they already kind of know that and they know that they can check you on it too. So I think where this is heading, I've heard this take, I think actually by Gary Vee in the past. I feel like I agree with it though is he's said that he feels with the new wave of AI, it will replace a lot of the maintenance stuff, but it will leave a lot of room for people that are like more of like the thinkers. So like how do we like consult on stuff? And I think for my world's doing consulting, that's what it seemed like. I think when we take on new projects, they oftentimes are willing to do a lot of the low level stuff that we present to them, but it's what we're talking about today. How do you see this on across all these different companies? How would you implement this strategy? How do you think we could apply this specifically to our business? And they're relying a lot more on that consulting take so that we can set up a foundation. So I think that's where we're trying to lean into is like, how do we become better strategic thinkers in our business? Because I think that's what's going to help us continue on. Because if you're just coming in and doing a task, in my world, it just seems like that's inevitable that it's just going to go away at some point. Like these agent things, now that we've interacted with them, I just feel like it's going to take away a lot of this like little stuff, creating fields and understanding where you should put stuff on a page layout and all that little stuff is just going to go away for Salesforce, I think, in the future.
Yeah, makes sense. I think what we're seeing too is I think I get excited. I haven't been this excited about like what's happening from a marketing perspective in a long time. I just feel like there's a lot of uncertainty, and I know a lot of people are nervous in terms of like what does this mean for me? What does it mean for my job? And I think that's understandable and makes a ton of sense. But I'm also like revitalized and rejuvenated because I think there's so much opportunity on the horizon. And I think to your point, I think there's the monotony of some of what we do day in, day out that I think AI can help either replace or, do for us or whatever. And so I think that's freeing us up to do, I think the things that matter where we can have the most impact. So I'm pretty stoked about that. Well, dude, thank you so much again for taking the time. For anyone who wants to get in touch with you, who might have some need for, maybe they need some help with Salesforce or HubSpot. I know you guys do HubSpot
Yeah.
consulting as well. What's the best way to get in contact with you and where can they find you?
Yeah, best place to get in contact is LinkedIn. Could search me up on there. If you want to get in contact with me or anyone on my team, that's probably just going to be the best route, honestly. It's probably the only place I'll plug.
Cool. Sounds
Yeah.
like a plan. That's awesome. Well, Jordan, thanks again for taking the time, man. Really appreciate it. And thanks for the convo today. Very
Yeah.
helpful.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Jordan. It's awesome being on.
Thanks, man. Take care.